Hi, I'm Stacy. I'm with Spirit of Faith Adoptions, and I have Craig and Barb here with me. Craig is an expert, in my opinion, in understanding the adoption tax credit. And I'm just going to hand it over to you, Craig, and you can tell us just a little bit of your background and explain who you are, first of all.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Craig Hargenrader. I am an adoptive father and husband to my lovely wife, Barb, first and foremost. And secondarily, I'm a finance guy. Now, I am not a CPA, so I'm not like officially licensed to give tax advice, but I can kind of help to guide folks into the right channel of information here, so hopefully this will be helpful. Having gone through it myself, so I've adopted 4 children, and so one was a private adoption through Spirit of Faith, and then we adopted 3 children, a sibling group of 3 out of the foster care system. So each of those has kind of a different financial flavor, if you will, but utilize the tax credits and yeah, so I have various experiences with those different adoptions.
So I see first here, we're looking at the IRS website where you would point people to go, and it says qualified adoption expenses. So I'd love it if you could talk to us a little bit about someone who is either thinking about adoption or who is, excuse me, in process, like what kind of records should they be keeping and what kind of expenses do count?
Sure. Well, so the tax credit is, so according to the website in 2021 is $14,440 per child. So that's important to know, but you don't get that dollar amount unless you itemize expenses to qualify for those dollars. So you in your adoption process, you have to itemize up to $14,440 worth of expense in order to get that tax credit. And then the other thing is the tax credit is actually, against your taxable income. So you get reimbursed, based on your taxable income. So one of the things that I ran into with this adoption that we did with the sibling group of 3 is the tax credit. I actually got 3 times $14,440. So I actually was able to carry over that tax credit for multiple years. And I think it's actually says in here up to like 5 years. You're able, so the initial tax year that you finalize the adoption, you're able to put the tax credit against that year, and then you're able to carry it forward up to 5 years after that. So you essentially get like 6 years that you can utilize that tax credit against your taxable income to recoup those dollars. So does that make sense, or is that a lot?
It does, and it's good. Even just real plain terms, like when when a family drives to our office, can they deduct those miles and the tolls and any meals, or what are the guidelines there?
Yeah, sure. So like on the website here, it shows that, they have to be qualified adoption expenses. So, they need to qualify under the IRS standard. So here, for example, they talk about, adoption fees are deductible and qualify, attorney's fees, court costs, travel expense. So like when we adopted our daughter, we had to stay over in a hotel for a couple of days till the adoption was finalized. So all those expenses, the meals, the lodging, that and travel, all were qualified expenses that could be used against the tax credit. So what I did was, and I'm, a finance guy, I'm a spreadsheet guy, so I just kept a spreadsheet with all the expenses itemized, and then, threw into an envelope all of the receipts that align to that spreadsheet of itemized expenses. And We actually, with our adoption, got up to about $20,000 worth of expense. And so we qualified for the full tax credit, which is very helpful. So if you think about, $14,400 or $14,440 against the cost of the adoption, that is, reimburses you for a good chunk of that, 2/3 of that expense.
And then there's an Ohio tax credit for those who are adopting in Ohio, right? So that's different than what you just mentioned.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, I didn't look up the Ohio has its own, tax credit amount. I seem to remember when we adopted, it was like 1,500 per child, but I haven't looked that up lately, so I don't know if that's gone up. But the federal is the big, dollar amount, but the state tax credit certainly adds to the overall, tax credit that you get against the adoption. So
Yeah, I don't want to misquote, and I haven't checked, but last time I heard or read something, it was significantly higher than $1,500. So, what else should I be asking you, Craig? I'm kind of drawing a blank. So, oh, when do these, two questions. So if someone is planning to move forward with an adoption, but for whatever reason that adoption fails or doesn't go forward, can they still claim this expense?
yeah, so in that case, so any itemized expenses that you have, what we did is, when you have an adoption that is finalized and you have all the court documents and everything that verify that the adoption occurred, that was when you're able to then file for the tax credit. But any expenses that you have leading up to that adoption, qualify, whether was a failed adoption or not, like just anything that leads up to that one completed adoption qualifies against the tax credit.
Okay. I guess that was my other question of when can someone claim these expenses, but you answered that of when after the adoption is finalized is when it can be
Yeah,
applied.
but there is a stipulation in there, and this is where, I'm not a tax attorney that specializes in, this field, but there is a stipulation in there. So let's say, your adoption, falls through and you're like, I don't know, 3 years into the process. I think there is a process for, for that. I don't know that they necessarily exclude you from the tax credit if you're unable to complete an adoption. That again is somewhere I would, defer to more of a CPA on that question.
So just one final one that I thought of that's not really tax related, but just expense related is, isn't it true that some employers offer an adoption credit of some kind? And how do you find out about that?
Yeah, so actually when we adopted our daughter, I was working at an employer at the time that had a $10,000 tax credit as well. So we, between the federal, state, and then my employer tax credit, we essentially, the full cost of our adoption was covered. So, and I think, that's probably good news to the adoptive parents. The only caveat is that you have to have those funds, up front. So you have to be able to like pay those fees and things, as you're going along in advance. And then, with the tax credit, obviously you're going to have a deferred, reimbursement of those monies once you file your federal taxes. So, that's the only caveat is that you have to kind of pay for the, pay in advance, and then you're going to get reimbursed on the back end. So there is a timing issue there.
And And one last thing, if you get $10,000 from your employer, does that impact your ability to deduct expenses from your taxes? Or do you have to report that, or how does all that work?
That's a good question. I want to say like my employer required me to, submit, expenses or submit against that tax credit as well. So, but between the two sources, I just remember that I had enough expenses, to cover the full amount of the adoption. So I can't remember. I think my employer actually reimbursed, reimbursed without like that final adoption decree. I think they reimbursed based on, that we were in the process. So I think I went through my employer first and got that tax credit or that adoption benefit from them first. And then what was left over, I filed against the taxes.
And
Sounds
not
good.
not all employers advertise that they have an adoption credit. You should ask someone in human resources.
Okay. Is there anything I forgot to ask?
One thing I just wanted to mention here, that I was just looked up the Ohio adoption tax credit just to get the number. So the Ohio adoption credit is sorry, I thought I had it here. I'm sorry, I thought I had it on the website.
Okay.
Are you able to edit, Stacy?
I can.
You're gonna have to, because it's, for some reason, it came right up on the federal, but it's not coming up. Does Ohio have it? Instead, Ohio credit is the greater of $1,500 or your adoption-related expenses up to $10,000 for each adoption. The adoption credit is non-refundable. You can use it forward up to 5 consecutive tax years.
That's wonderful news. Thank you both
Yeah.
so much for sharing your story and sharing what worked for you and how to go about that. I think it's very, very useful and very helpful. So thank you again.
Thanks.